Hello, everyone. My name is Jamie Criswell, and I am the sales director for production development in the Americas for Sennheiser. And I would like to welcome you to our next episode, episode number 3 of Don't Stop the Education, featuring professional theater. Today, we're going to have a conversation, a roundtable conversation, if you will, with some of the leading names in sound design for Broadway and for the West End. So thank you all for attending, and let's make sure that we keep our industry alive, well, and kicking during this kind of unusual and tumultuous time. But right now, I would like to introduce our panel, and we'll get a quick hello from all of them. We will have Q&As all during that, which will be monitored live. So please, everyone out there, please drop your questions. It's going to be a fascinating time, and I would like to thank everyone for attending, and certainly thank all of our panelists. First and foremost, let's start with Jessica Paz, that you may know from the Broadway show Hadestown. We have Scott Lehrer, well known for To Kill a Mockingbird, and also a revival of Music Man that is coming up soon, right? Likewise, we have Mr. Nevin Steinberg from the show Hamilton, which you may have heard of, right? And Gareth Owen from Come From Away, and Reese Kirsh from Back to the Future. So panelists, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. Please say hello.
Hey guys.
Hey. How's everybody doing?
Great. That's fantastic. So once again, everyone out there attending the webinar, please start dropping questions. We'll absolutely try to get them to them as soon as we possibly can. So I as the moderator, my goal here is, of course, we want to have a fantastic conversation about the fascinating world that all of you do, the interesting jobs that you do. And then, of course, my intention is really hopefully to hear as little of me as possible during this whole thing. But likewise, I'd like to thank the Sennheiser SoundAcademy for putting on this series. And also, I would like to thank the Relationship Management team, who is also on the line, who are responsible for the entire series. Once again, this is episode 3. And it will be part 1 of 2, right? So just to get this started, I hope everyone's well today. And I understand that we're all kind of in our, regular secluded areas. Is anyone still at this point? Are you still working? Are you still working during this time?
Who are you starting with, Jamie?
I think we'll start with Mr. Gareth Owen.
Okay, start with me. We're doing quite a lot of Zoom meetings. We're doing quite a lot of conversations about how we're going to be doing shows in the future and when we're going to be doing shows in the future. And I guess we're also doing quite a lot of, we're trying to take the opportunity to do a lot of preparation and do things that we've been going, oh yeah, for the last 10 years. Oh, if I had time, I should really write down how we do that. So we've been trying to do a lot of that. Actual working, if working is sound engineering in a theatre, absolutely none of it.
Anyone else? Scott, what's your current schedule?
Well, we're trying to, some of the producers are trying to act as if that we're going to start things up on some kind of schedule, which was supposed to be, June, and now is starting to look more like August, September. So we've been doing some work getting ready for the Music Man production, because we should be actually trying to find out what shop we're going to be working with. So we've been developing our equipment lists, and I've been talking to the music director of that show to start figuring out pit layouts for that show, things like that. And there were a couple of tours of To Kill a Mockingbird supposedly going out that we're also trying to figure out, how we'll get those things going. But it's hard because we don't really know what the real schedules are. So we're doing a certain amount of the background work, kind of like what Gareth said, you know, doing paperwork, preparing for things, but not really, not in a space doing any real work like that.
Jessica?
I have been doing a considerable amount of work on my my symbol library, and sort of gearing up for the potential the Hadestown tour, which we think is going out in the fall. The Delacorte just got canceled, which is very, very sad.
That's sad.
And I was holding out. I was sort of holding out hope for that, but it just announced at the end of last week that it will not be moving forward this season, which I think is unprecedented. I think it's never been canceled before in its entire history. So, yeah, super sad. Otherwise, sketching, doing a lot of sketching.
Yeah, so many things are unprecedented, right? It's not like we can all fall back on what our plan was the last time this happened, and so many things are put into question. Yeah. Reese, how about yourself?
Extremely little, unfortunately. Yeah, absolutely nothing. Just just trying to do as much as I can, sort of learning, piecing things together, taking the time to sort of. We don't get too many opportunities to just stop and plan out stuff, do we? So I suppose using that this is an opportunity to do that, really, learning. I know Gareth and the team have been doing a lot of, we've been doing a lot of sort of lessons and teachings with different manufacturers and stuff like that, which has been good, but actual work, once again, very little. So yeah, a bit frustrating, but see the positive in it and yeah, do some other bits really, I suppose.
Yeah, I understand. Nevin, is there anything to add?
Not really. I mean, I'm doing a lot of time staying in touch with my teams, you know, here in the States and London and some even around the world at the moment, just trying to keep everybody informed and engaged with the constantly changing landscape of closures and possible openings. So that's been, you know, a big part of my daily life is trying to stay in touch with them and in touch with what might be happening, and you know, encouraging professional development for them and engaging in it myself as well. So, like my colleagues, much the same. There's definitely some, you know, some planning going on for shows that are far in advance. The things that are currently scheduled for like next summer, for example, are in active kind of producerial development. There's a lot of kind of action regarding those because I think those feel likely and there's certainly time to work on them. But anything immediate, you know, is definitely being pushed off and trying to button up some old projects too, you know, some things that were in process that have been postponed. We can kind of get them to a good stopping place and then shelve them for a while. So yeah, much the same as everyone else, just day to day.
Understood. Would someone please comment on what was your pathway to become a Broadway or West End sound designer, or to work on Broadway or the West End? What were some of the things that kind of led up to this part in your careers and your interests? Anybody want to volunteer?
Sure, why not? Somebody's got to jump in on it. You know, there was just this is actually doesn't have to do with COVID news, but a musician named Richard Teitelbaum died yesterday. He was on the faculty at Bard College, and he was one of the people who kind of created the world of creative electronic music back in the 1960s and 70s. He partnered with Robert Moog, creating certain ways of working with the Moog synthesizer, and he improvised with electronic music. And I think that was really the source of how I got into doing sound design. Was getting involved in the early 1970s with electronic music, and then having that kind of in a sideways way, which a lot of us in the sound design world can understand, moving toward doing sound and creative sound design out of electronic music. And Richard Teitelbaum was one of my inspirations for that.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you.
Sorry to hear about your friend Scott and your colleague. Yeah, I got into sound by way of music as well. I was a musician, amateur musician growing up, and through my college years, but got into theater sort of via music, and then found myself with an affinity for the audio side, and just kind of dove in, and found some very good mentors and teachers along the way. And that path, you know, feels like one of the common paths among my colleagues, which is, you know, from musician to sound person. There's obviously a lot of ways to do this, but that's not uncommon when I talk to my friends in the business.
I saw a webinar the other day where one of the panelists said, it seems like, you know, all sound engineers started off as musicians. And I thought, shit, that's really bad, because I can't play any instruments at all. And like as Nevin said, everyone else seems to play instruments and be really musical. So I think maybe I should invent some sort of musical history of being able to play like the tambourine and the harpsichord at the same time. But the reality of it is I don't play any instruments. I've since learned to play music and read orchestral scores, and I can kind of hold my own with a group of musicians, but I've never composed a note of music or played an instrument in my life, or at least not well enough that anybody would want to listen to it.
So did you train though, Gareth? Because I actually don't know your background. Like we know each other, but I don't know, how did you get into audio?
I started in rock and roll. I started in nightclubs, mixing bands in nightclubs, and then I ended up working for a big rock and roll company in the UK and doing big rock bands and stuff. But I've always enjoyed theatre, and then I just realised, I just realised how I'm a total geek, and I realised how complicated theatre is, and how like there's so much to learn and so many exciting things going on in theatre sound. And I was just like, this is what I want to do. You're going to really push yourself to be good at this. This is really exciting. And so the geek in me took me off down theatre road because it was more exciting. Yeah, I did a degree in underwater science, and people quite often ask me what that is about, and I still can't really tell you. Chemistry in a swimming pool, or
Marine biology,
submarines or stuff, but no, I have no formal training in sound engineering whatsoever.
cool.
I also have no training, and I actually went to college for a year to study forensic psychology, and I had
That's quite useful for theatre, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like dramaturgy, I think.
Yeah, right.
I quickly realized after about a year of that that I was not going to be a police officer or an FBI agent. I stopped going to college, and I began stage managing, actually, at a community theater, and then sort of hopped on the sound console one day, and that was the end of it. I never looked back.
Right. So Reese, how'd you get there?
Complete by accident. I think I just wanted to hang out with cool bands and be a really cool 15, 16-year-old on tour, living the dream. And then I went to performing arts school by accident, and then fell into theatre. So yeah, complete accident, but a good accident. So yeah, just went to university. My mum told me it was a good idea to go and get a degree. So I did a sound technology course. Met a few people, started doing a bit of theatre, and then yeah, just keep rolling with it, really.
That's great. Thank you for that. And not that it matters. I got here because I was rather unpolitely asked to leave a tour bus. It's a longer story for later.
Did it involve
yeah. It was back before the days of Uber too, so it was an issue.
I want to hear this.
How, as sound designers, can someone please comment on what are the things that you look at in terms of producing the desired audio experience when you're first introduced to a project? Do you well, you know what? I'm going to leave it at that because I don't want to lead the answer too much. But can anyone comment on what are the kind of the things that you're looking for when you first get involved with a project, before maybe even before you've even started your design?
I would say my approach is different depending on whether it's a musical or a play, and what I think about. Yeah, what I think about when approaching a design is definitely different, whether it's a musical or a play. I'll start there, and I'll let others hop in.
I think about who the rest of the oh, sorry, Scott, go on.
I was going to say also in the musical context, it's kind of what type of musical it is. I think we all have, I guess, specialties to some degree in different areas of musicals, but we all are also generalists, I think. And so if I'm doing something that's a more pop oriented thing, I would think of having a different type of sound system than if I'm doing a more traditional acoustically orchestrated musical. It requires a different sounding sound system, and I might actually have different types of speakers, different ways of doing the reinforcement support, the way I do surrounds, the way I'll do reverberation in the room itself to create a reverberant world for the music. So the type of music that we're doing for a particular musical makes a big difference to me.
Yeah, I agree with you, Scott. I think, yeah, I mean, the first word that comes to mind is style. I don't know that like it doesn't cover everything, but for me, that's what it means, is either in a drama or a non-musical or a musical. The idea that a thing has style, and trying to get inside what that style might be, even if you don't know exactly what it is yet, by having dialogue with the director, with the choreographer, with the music department, with the writers, just sort of being around the rest of the creative team, getting a sense of the scenery and the lighting and the costume designs. All of that starts to inform your sense of what this thing might ultimately be and how you're going to participate in it as a designer and as a storyteller. So style is the first word that comes to mind, and then ultimately resolves, maybe into taste, but style is kind of the first big benchmark for me.
Can you speak to what happens to the role of sound designer once a show opens? Once it opens, when it runs for a while, what kind of how does the sound designer, as the head sound designer, how does that relationship between you and the show continue while it runs? Gareth, you want to take a shot at that one?
Yeah, I mean, it's a maintenance thing. It's going back, it's watching what's going on, listening, and maybe giving constructive notes, maybe just buying a round of drinks. I mean, there's a thing definitely when you're behind the mixing desk week in, week out, where things will slightly drift, not necessarily in a bad way, sometimes in a good way, but things will often drift because you can't hear that every day. If you're mixing the same thing every day, there'll be tiny changes. And so going back as a sound designer after, say, 2 months away from the show, you can come back in and go, oh, actually, I think that snare drum's drifted a bit, or I think the vocals are just a bit loud here. And giving that constructive feedback, and also helping the sound team on the show deal with political problems with other departments that they might be having. You can sometimes, as the designer, you can sometimes go in and, I don't want to say throw your weight around, but you can sort of back them up if they're having a problem with, actually, this quick change is going wrong because this is happening, and you can sort of go back and kind of help with those kind of things as well. But as I say, half the time it's just going back and buying a round of drinks.
It might be good to mention as well, obviously I'm probably the only panelist here that isn't a sound designer. I'm an operator, I mix shows. So I see it from the other side, is what Gareth's saying. And I suppose it's that key link of having good communication between me and the designer, and sort of that process together really helps to, I think, keep the show on the right track, keep the vision sort of moving on and evolving, but keeping the same fundamentals from press night, I think, is really important. And that just comes down to good dialogue, I think, really.
What are the three-ish couple of biggest challenges that you can face when a Broadway residency becomes a Broadway tour? What are a couple of the things that as the audio, the head of the audio department, that you need to kind of look at or maybe rethink?
How you're going to take something that you spent weeks and weeks and weeks getting right in a Broadway house, how are you going to take that thing and make it load in 8 hours? That's a bit of a challenge.
And have a performance that first night with reviewers from that city in the audience, you know, after having 3 weeks.
Have them not say, it sounded terrible, what are these clowns doing?
Yeah, it's very different.
Yeah, that's a big one. Sort of going from the specific and the sort of, you know, custom bespoke sound in a West End house or a Broadway house, and then sort of having to generalize it for theaters that range in size. For in the US, you know, we're talking about theaters that on the road, correct me if I'm wrong, Scott, but I mean, we go from anywhere from like 12 or 1,300 seats to 5,000 seats on the road. I mean, it's a huge range of venues, and we're basically carrying that same sound package to cover all of those venues. I would also say personnel is really a big one for me when translating a show from a sit down to a road show. You know, it's a different set of skills, or a complementary set of skills to have to move a show on the road and be remote kind of from the home office and be traveling and having people who are good at that and good at the audio side as well, good at maintaining a show, mixing a show. You know, sort of being in that environment is also a big concern. So there's a lot that goes into the team when you're making a show travel.
It's a much tougher job. You know, you need operators who are not really good operators, but can work on no sleep and direct crews every week to get the show in and out without alienating local crews because they're so tired and so overworked from doing that touring every week. It's a tough job, and it's very hard to staff the tours, you know. So it's there are equipment issues, and how do you put together a system that moves efficiently? That's the most important part of your job as a designer for touring, is making an efficient system that can be pulled out of a truck and set up efficiently and taken down efficiently and clearly set up for people. And then hopefully you have the people on the tour who actually have all those skills I was talking about.
That sounds like quite a bit. I'm going to pass it over to my colleague Andy to read off a few questions that we're getting from the audience.
Hi, yeah, thank you. We're getting loads of questions coming in on the Q&A function, so I'm just going to reel off as many as we can. Thanks for these that are coming in. Jessica Jewell is asking, what advice do you have for sound designers of small theatres looking for bigger jobs? So I'm going to jump to Nevin.
Do a really good job on the smaller theater first. I mean, you know, there's no such thing as low stakes. At least where I come from, there's no such thing as a show that like the stakes aren't all the way up here all the time. You know, people see everything we do in New York, regardless of the size of the theater and regardless of the size of the length of the run or the size of the budget. You know, you can't do a show in a 99 seat theater that everybody isn't going to see and remember. And so your work, you know, both from a self-directed point of view has to be of the highest quality, but also remember that, you know, you're not going to get hired or recommended from those jobs unless you're doing exemplary work at that level. So I think, you know, the first thing is concentrate on the thing in front of you, and make the best thing you can with the people around you. And your best chance of getting a bigger job is moving as a part of that group, basically, of making something great in a smaller theater and having that group or that thing move to a bigger job in a bigger venue.
Thank you, Nevin. Does anyone want to add to that one before we move to the next?
Well, I do think it's about having those relationships. You know, you don't, I mean, most of the time you're not lucky enough to just quote unquote jump from a small theater to getting a big job. It's about the relationships that Nevin was talking about. You know, you develop relationships with a group of artists and you all grow in your work in the world that you're in, and you move elsewhere. you know, if you're lucky enough at a certain point, you start jumping around to other groups, but it's really about creating a great creative environment with the people that you're working with.
Fantastic. That leads me to another question. We're getting a lot of kind of novice questions right through to expert questions. So I'm going to sort of keep it down the lower end just for now. And someone is asking, can you talk about how you form a relationship with a producer and how the relationships with producers work? So I'm going to jump to Gareth for that one, please.
Forming a relationship with a producer usually comes secondhand from having formed a relationship with a creative, I think. I mean, I get jobs from producers, but it's usually producers I've worked with before. It's very rare that a producer comes to me out of the blue who I've never worked with before and says, we want to work with you. Whereas a producer will quite often come to me who I've never worked with before and say, our musical supervisor wants to work with you, our director wants to work with you, our composer wants to work with you. So others may disagree. I think for me, the relationships with the producers are secondhand to the relationships with the creatives, but they become real relationships in the long term, if that makes sense.
Totally. Does anyone want to add to that one?
It goes both directions, I think, you know, because sometimes you develop relationships with directors who lead you to producers, and then you become the kind of designer of choice for that producer. And depending on the kind of producer you're working with, there's one producer I work with a lot who's a creative producer. He very much puts together the teams for his shows. So very often I'm put forward as a designer to work on his productions because he's that kind of creative producer who puts together full packages of people. And you're fortunate if you get involved with a producer who's a creative producer like that, and you become one of their designers of choice. That's a great gig.
And you deliver, but you deliver for them too, Scott. I mean, that's the once, as Gareth said, you know, you may be led to a producer through a creative team, and I agree with you, Gareth, 100%. I think that's usually the path. But then once you arrive with a producer, as Scott has, and I know who you're talking about, and you know, you deliver the goods, you know, and so to a certain extent, when the stakes are that high, you know, and these people are putting together teams, they want people who know that they can deliver, and that's you know, that's another way you have a relationship with the producer is by making sure that you take yeah, exactly, take care of their thing. You know, they have a thing and they want you to take care of it. You should take care of it. So it's good.
Yeah. It does seem that it's possible to build a relationship with a producer where you end up becoming the go-to person for that producer. It does seem to be that I mean, there's quite a lot of shows. If you look at, there's a very, very small number of people who actually do West End and Broadway musicals. And what is interesting is that you'll see a producer bring in a completely different lighting designer, completely different scenic designer, different director, but yet they'll work with the same sound designer again and again. And I think that because sound has this mystic quality about it that nobody else understands it, when producers find somebody that they trust, who hasn't let them down and does a good job, doesn't screw it up, they tend to be really loyal to those people. There's a producer that I worked with for a decade in the UK. I did every musical he did for 10 years because, with completely different everyone. I think once people build a trust in sound designers, it seems to be a more loyal trust than it is necessarily for other creatives.
I think it's also, Gareth, part of what I've experienced too, is it's part of the kind of negotiation that happens between producers and directors about who they're getting to bring along. So a director gets a project with a writing team, and then they want to say, and then they say, I want my whole creative team that I did an off-Broadway show with 2 years ago. That's who I want to bring. And there's a negotiation about, you know, well, you can have your lighting designer, you know, but then I want to make sure that the sound is going to be taken care of. And so I'm going to bring Gareth. Or you can have your costume designer and your set designer, but, you know, in this case, I've got a lighting designer who absolutely I want on this project. I think they're correct. And that those talks that happen before, you know, we might ever even get a phone call are happening. And I think there's like a certain amount of leverage that happens between who on the creative team is coming from the director's side and how much power they have to influence that, and who on the creative team is coming from the other departments, either music or you know, or the producerial side, and exerting influence on the team that way. And I've heard those conversations happen, and I've gotten jobs and lost jobs, or not gotten jobs because of that. And it's, you know, that's where we are. That's where the business is at.
There also seems to be a sort of slightly unfortunate thing, more so in New York, I think, than in London, but it happens in London as well, in that you can't sound design a Broadway musical because you haven't sound designed a Broadway musical. People want, the number of times that out of town sound designers get thrown by the wayside, and we've all been, I suspect, you know, careers all been, I certainly was in London, you get pushed aside because you don't have Broadway or West End sound design credits. So it's kind of chicken and egg. You can't be a Broadway sound designer because you're not a Broadway sound designer. And that makes it really hard to break into sometimes.
I mean, do you all think that's changing though? I mean, I agree with you that that seemed to be what was happening a few years ago, but more recently it seems that there's been, and this is partly admittedly based on my own experience recently, which is that, you know, to be invited to be part of a creative team in the West End as an American sound designer was not heard of. It just wouldn't have happened on an originating show in the West End. And like that changed suddenly for me. I was so shocked. And you know, it's gone the other way too, where there are American or North American musicals that are hiring sound designers who are based in Europe or in the UK, and it's great. It's not a complaint, but I find it's relatively new that's happening.
I mean, we'll just continue this until you tell us to shut up, Andy. But I mean, if we let's take Tina as an example, because, you know, you are Nevin Steinberg, though. You're not an unknown sound designer from America that no one's heard of. You're sound designer of Hamilton. So you're not.
No, I guess you're right. I mean, that if you think that's the turning, yeah, I guess. But I am expensive. You know, it's an expensive proposition to fly me over and house me in London. I'm not based there. You know, that adds complications. You know, yeah. Regardless of my experience.
You know, I experienced that the opposite way, doing new stuff in New York as well. And it's often, you know what? It's so often the first question that people ask me. And it turns out that they've already decided I'm doing the new Broadway musical, but they start the conversation with, oh, we need to talk to you about costs of this and costs of that. And you're like, but I think that's, I don't know, I would back up, take Tina as an example. I would back that up in the fact that you are already a known entity and not an unknown.
Maybe, yeah.
But I think there's also a level of, you know, risk aversion that producers don't want to take risks in any areas they don't have to, you know. And if you haven't done a Broadway musical as whatever kind of designer, there's a lot of skills that are specific to doing Broadway and West End musicals that, you know, they do scale to some degree from other places. And I think because a lot of people are getting better trained these days in the skills of especially things like sound and lighting design they used to be, they're more ready to be able to walk into Broadway and West End houses than they used to be. But still, there's a lot of risk aversion, I think, that, you know, commercial producers don't want to have things mess up, and they want to go.
Millions of dollars at stake. I mean, literally tens of millions. Yeah.
Somebody once said to me that any producer who doesn't have a preference as to who the sound designer is has never worked with a bad one. And I thought that's quite interesting, because we've all been to shows where we've stood there and gone, oh, how are they getting away with this? And I think creatives and producers, when they get badly bitten, badly scarred by a bad sound experience on a show, and then they end up working with somebody who delivers what they want, they can suddenly become very, very loyal to those people. And I think we've all on this panel benefited from those loyalties. So there are certain composers and certain producers out there that I'll never work with, but I don't begrudge it, because those same loyalties that mean that Nevin will always get the call from that person, that same loyalty goes the other way with somebody else who I know I'm always going to get the call from. I don't know quite how we've got so far off topic on this.
It's fine.
Yeah,
Talking
definitely.
about loyalty, though, someone has just jumped in with a question, and I'm going to go back to Scott because he was saying about staffing tours. So Rebecca Stroll is asking, when staffing a tour, do you tend to hire people who are part of the Broadway or West End team, or people who are touring A1s? So what kind of approach do you take in that, or is it a mix of 50-50?
I got to say, I'm also become fairly conservative about this. I hate to say that, but the job of my associate or my assistant is such a critical job that we develop really long-term relationships with people who have worked with us for a long time, know what we need and what we want, and are really good at doing all the paperwork. And that's something you have to work your way up through a particular kind of system. Like doing Broadway shows, I think it started to filter its way down into other areas. Like Jess could talk about how, when people are putting stuff together at the Public, like for Shakespeare in the Park, it's very much a lot of times the same people who I'm using and Nevin is using and Gareth is using for putting together Broadway shows. It's a lot of the same crew people, and there's a crossing over between those kind of teams, and it's similar in a way with mixers. It takes a lot of experience as a mixer to walk into a Broadway theater and be able to deliver the goods for the producer, the director, the designer, the audience, the composer. It's a tough, stressful job. And so when you find people who actually can meet those needs as a mixer, you want to stick with them. I'll mention names here. I use Karen Ford on a lot of my shows because she's a really great mixer of traditional sounding acoustic Broadway shows. She just has amazing ears and is incredibly fast getting mixes to just work in the first preview, which is really helpful.
What was that name again? I should write that down.
None of your business. We all know her.
Just like a director wants to work with designers in which they have a shorthand with, I want to work with an A1 that I have a shorthand with, right? So where we understand each other, and someone that I trust to make choices that I then can respond to with notes, right? I don't want to have to like, hey, do it exactly this way. I want them to make decisions and
certainly
be creative.
Certainly something that does seem to have evolved a lot recently, and when I say recently, I mean in the last 10 years, is the role of associate. In 10 years ago, I'd never had an associate. The associate would be the A1 who would also do the paperwork, or the production engineer who would also be the mixer. And it seems like the role of associate sound designer is sort of right-hand person that is not somebody that's new for every project, but somebody that you've worked with before and understands what you're going to say before you're going to say it. I feel like that role has become much more prominent and much more normal in shows over the last 10 years. I mean, certainly, I don't think I had an associate before 10 years ago, and now I honestly wouldn't know where to start without one. And they're generally the same people because they're the people, because there's this age-old problem that sometimes it takes longer to explain something to somebody that does just do it yourself. So once you've explained it, but if you can take that time to explain it, then you don't have to explain it the next time. And certainly with associates and assistants, you do tend to want to try and work with the same people, and A1s actually, because you don't have to explain what you want, they just kind of know. And that builds real loyalties within teams and real teams of people that you want to keep working with. And certainly I'm a big fan of that, mainly because I'm lazy and I don't want to explain it all again.
That leads me to a question. We're getting quite a few questions from people who it looks like they're on the start of their journey. So I'm going to direct this one to Jessica and perhaps Reese. And it's in live, this is from Joshua Stallings, who's saying, in live engineering, what is your process for building your mix Where do you start and where do you think about relative levels and with the relationship with the director? And then also, Reese, I'll pass that to you afterwards, of how do you maintain that standard of sound that maybe, you know, Gareth set up, and kind of how do you continue with that? So sorry, over to Jess, and then I'm going to jump back to Jamie.
It depends on the style of the show. I'm gonna say something that Nevin said earlier. It's about the style, and I start with just trying to make sure that the game structure of the system in and out is done well, and then from there you can start to carve out where the show fits. So like I think of it like, how do you sculpt? How do you make a sculpture, right? It's just like chip away at all the things that don't belong there. So that's kind of how I approach it. It's like, it's really about, it's not about adding anything. It's about taking away all the things that don't belong. And, you know, sometimes it takes a little bit of time to find the pocket, but that's what tech is for, I think, you know, and that's where the conversations, begin to happen in you know, that live environment. You can have a lot of creative conversations with your director beforehand, and you know, you have a starting place, but you really get to respond to what's happening in the room in a different way than just like theoretically on paper.
And Reese, as an A1, once the kind of show's up and running, how do you sort of maintain that sort of, I don't know, the standards of what Gareth maybe is looking at?
It all starts from day one, really. It's about listening right from day one, sort of understanding what Gareth, what the directors, what the producers want, because there comes that day after press night where it becomes very lonely and you realise you're the only person there looking after the show from a sound perspective. And it's then trusting what you've learned through that preview period, through that tech period, listening, understanding it, and then you'd be able to make sort of hopefully the accurate decision about what happens, because things do drift, people change, people get tired, so it's all about having a clear vision of what the show should sound like, not just putting your faders at the right position or assuming, you know, having a clear understanding of the vision of the show, just as much as what the designers do and stuff like that, I think allows you to maintain the show to a high level, I think, at that point.
That's a great answer. Does any of the other panelists want to add anything there before we jump back to Jamie?
I'll give, you know, for people early in their careers, I'd say don't get too bogged down in the details early on. Like we're still in this crazy position with sound where we don't get the full band until like 2 or 3 days before the first audience. And if we start worrying about the sound of the kick drum too much, we're going to get fired from our job. We have to like make sure that the vocals sound good, which we're given time to do. And when the full band comes in, make sure that your general, what Jonathan Tunick calls your integral balance of your band sounds right. And then you can work on details later, because you have to actually present the show to an audience that first night in a pretty decent way. And don't waste your sound check time on what I would call the small details, even though the sound of a kick drum is really important. You have a whole band up there and the band has to sound good as a band, and make sure you get the general stuff in for the beginning and then work on the details. And I think probably the designers might have responses to that, but that's my general feeling about it. Make sure your mixer has a band master fader that allows them to bring the band up that sounds like a good sounding band of that type, and work on the details over the preview period.
I agree.
Yeah, I have a saying that Jessica's heard a number of times, which is at the end of the first day, which is, you know, sound came out and nobody got hurt. That's sort of like where you start, you know, like if you can just get to that point where your sound system's functional, tech rehearsal went fine, you know, the band comes out of the speakers, the vocals come out of the speakers, and everything is basically functioning.
And no one's mad at you.
I just assume everybody's mad at me all the time, but that's just a good baseline to begin. And then, you know, then you sort of kind of get to work. But functionality is your sort of kind of the first step. As Scott was saying, you really just need something that just works.
years ago, I used to work for a sound rental company, and one of the things they used to do was they used to do the sound for a lot of the big pantomimes in the UK, which for our non-British British people, every year most British theatres stop doing whatever it is they're doing and put on like a month of pantomime, which is basically a variety act that you have to load in, tech, and preview in a week.
Oh no, they don't.
Very good. And the number of times, so in order to do this, because we had to get all of these shows on in such a short length of time, we book all sorts of different sound designers, various different skills to get these shows on in a week. And every year, the week after they opened, me and a couple of the guys from the company would keep that week free to go and fix whatever shows there were a problem with, because something would always go wrong. And almost invariably, the shows that went wrong were the ones where the designers had gone in and they got the perfect imaging and the absolute perfect sub-phase coherence alignment between the center cluster and proscenium and the front fills. But they'd completely missed the fact that you couldn't hear the words, or that the kick drum was just obliterating the whole of the rest of the band. And we just used to have this rule: we can't go in. Can you hear the words? Okay, good. That is 0. That's 101. That is. Can you hear the words? Okay, good. Now you can start worrying about the perfect phase alignment of the front fills to the upstage center sound effect speaker and stuff. And that, you know, for that same idea and that same rule has worked really well for me, and I think many other designers, in that you just go in and you just worry about the basics, which is exactly what Scott, Jess, and Nevin have all just said. You worry about the basics first, you get that bit right, and then when no one's shouting at you and no one's grumbling about the fact they can't hear the piano on stage, and the voice of God mics are working, and comms is working, and CCTV is working, because we have to worry about all that as well. Once all of those things are good, then you can start worrying about the perfect reverb on the sound effect of the sad curlew flying around the room. Sad curlew being a reference to Trevor Nunn shows where you can't do a show without a sad curlew bird flying around the room.
Fantastic answers, guys. Thank you so much. Jamie, I'm going to pass back to you while I go and field some more questions. Thank you. Cheers, guys.
Thank you, Andy. I'd like to continue a little bit from the audience. We seem to have struck a chord here. Typically, how specific are the notes from designer to A1 early in the preview process? A question by Jay Hilton. Can I throw that question to Scott?
We really started talking about the relationship we have. Jess was talking about how, you know, having a mixer who doesn't need to be given a lot of notes, who has musicality just as a start and mixes with musicality, that cuts out a lot of notes that you'd have to give otherwise, you know, because I find with some mixers don't really hear the dynamics the way I necessarily want them to. They're more worried about having the voice heard over the music, for instance, or they want to hear the interest and excitement of the music and forget about the voice. And that's just a general thing where I have to work with a mixer to say, here's the moments where I really want the music to take over, and here are the moments where it's important that we hear the words more. The details of the mix, I don't get to for a couple of weeks usually. I mean, in terms of, like, you know, that there's that really great oboe solo that oboe fill that happens in the second verse of this particular song that's really beautiful, and can't we feature it a little bit more? I don't get into those details for weeks, because again, talking about this thing of getting your mix going, you work at it bit by bit. You start off with the bigger things and you get to the smaller and smaller details, which ends up being more fun. You know, when I can get to a point with my mixer where I say, hey, I really love that reed section there. Can we change the reed horn balance so that we get a better punch in the reed section in that one particular part of the song? I don't do that right at the beginning. I do that a week in or 2 weeks in to working on the mix of the project. Oh, that's.
I mean, early on, I kind of I wanted to like give them an opportunity to just like have a good couple of cracks at it. not to say that I don't give notes, but they're usually general, like more band, less band. I need to hear these words. I can't hear those words, or bury this, don't bury that. But you know, it's a difficult job, and what I'm looking for early on in the preview process is a good, like, front to back product.
You know, one other thing I didn't bring up, but I think it's really important for all of us, is the ergonomics of the mixer setup. Because a lot of the times we're not giving notes because the mixer is mixing and we're standing next to them, to their right or to their left at the console, tweaking stuff while they're mixing. And we're hearing things, we're hitting the save button on that particular cue in that particular song to save tweaks that we've been doing during that song. And it's really important to have your ergonomics of your console worked out in advance, because it's really hard to change it once you're in the theater. And think about how you as a designer can get your fingers on the mix without interrupting the operator actually mixing the show. Because you're always, and a lot of times my associate will be on the left side of the console doing RF tweaking while I'm on the right-hand side of the console doing band balances, and the mixers in the middle of the console on their DCAs actually mixing the show. So ergonomics is super important on your console and the setup of the console to be able to get to the point where the mix is starting to sound better and better.
Interesting. That leads me right to the next one. Nevin, how much input do you want or like from the A1 or the mixing crew about the overall sound of the show?
You know, as I've gotten older and more experienced, I think more and more. You know, I think when I was a younger designer, I thought I wasn't particularly receptive to my engineers, you know, talking back to me about how they felt things were going. It just didn't seem like that was something I needed to do. And I just got smarter, basically, and learned that, you know, that voice is important. You know, sometimes it's just important that you know, that dialogue's happening at all. It may not be actionable intelligence, right? You may not actually take that information and do anything with it, but the leaving time for those conversations is very valuable. Both from a, you know, just a cumulative data point of view, but also from a team building point of view, you know, a collaboration point of view. And then, you know, frankly, a lot of the A1s I get to work with are, you know, smarter than me about stuff. And, you know, I do want to hear what they have to say. I'm anxious to hear an idea they might have. And, you know, I think I've always said to my engineers, you know, persuade me, tell me what you think. I mean, I may not agree, or I may not, you know, do anything with that information, but, you know, we should have that conversation. I think it's finding the right time for those conversations. You know, it's not going to be an intermission necessarily of first preview when the producer's here and the choreographer's here, you know, talking to you. That, you know, I think everybody needs to understand that there are moments for that, but I do try and make time for those conversations and leave time for them. I think your engineers got a lot of good information, and you can certainly leverage it, both to help them do their job better and to learn a little bit more about what you might not be focused on, you know, because there's always more information than you can possibly process. It's just, you know, you're just filtering so much information when you're out in the theater listening. So if somebody says to you, if an engineer says to you, boy, that one wireless mic just doesn't sound right, you're like, wow, it just didn't even occur to me because I was listening to, for lack of a better example, the kick drum or something like that. You know, I was just focused on something else. So it's a good conversation to have. And I continue to try and be more and more open to it.
I think one of the best skills, one of the most important skills you can have as a sound designer is an ability to take everybody's opinion, because everybody has an opinion. And I don't just mean the sound engineers, I mean the choreographer, the director, as Nevin just mentioned, the orchestrator, arranger,
The audience.
the audience. The bass player's girlfriend is always the one that gets comment, you know, it always gets quoted in rock and roll. But to take all of those opinions and distill them and listen to them all, because they may, every single one of them may be a valid opinion, take them all on board, but then have the confidence to go, you know what, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're right, you're right, you're wrong, and action the things that make sense and the things that don't. And the ability to take all that information in, distill it, discard the stuff that's rubbish, and take on board the stuff that's good, that is a really, really, really good skill for sound designer. It's something that my ego is still struggling to let me do a lot of the time, but I'm trying really, really hard to be better at doing it.
And it's really hard when you're getting contradictory opinions from every department. That's one of the big skill building things, is how do you reconcile all those contradictory opinions you're getting and try to make everybody, or as many people as possible, happy. It's
still be friends with them all at the end of it.
Yeah, or most of them.
Excellent. I'd like to shift a little bit, if you'll indulge me, to something, a really good question, I think, from the chat, from the audience, and certainly something that's very relevant to us as a manufacturer. But can you address your choice of microphones from the viewpoint of the pattern? So for the most part, it's mainly omnidirectional and not cardioid, or am I incorrect? Or was actually a very interesting question, and would like to really get the input from someone working. First and foremost, can I throw this question over to Reese on the deck?
Sorry, can you just explain what you mean? Is that in terms of vocal mics? Is it, you were saying omni mics, was it?
Correct. Yeah, the usage of character mics is what I call them. But they're, is there a way to address the usage of omnis as opposed to the use of cardioids?
Go on, Gareth, have that one.
I mean, I'm going to go out on a limb and say all but one of our shows uses omnidirectional microphones. The type of shows I do tend to be sort of louder, more rock and roll type musicals. So I tend to be able to win the argument about getting microphones closer to the mouth, getting them down the side here. A lot of the shows that Scott does, the director would throw him out the nearest window if he tried to put the microphone by the corner of the mouth. So a lot of the stuff Scott's doing is like right up in the hairline. But in both cases, we're probably using the same capsule. I'm using a 4066, you're using a 4061. Maybe we've evolved into 6066s, MK. Maybe we don't, sorry, this is a Sennheiser group. Obviously, we're using MK2s. Sorry about that. But different capsules. It's basically the same capsule in the same place. The only show, actually, that I'd use anything other than that on is a show in London called Mamma Mia the Party. And because of the fact that Mamma Mia the Party, the cast are always in front of the speakers wherever they are. It's a fully immersive Greek taverna with a massive sound system in it. The cast and the band are fully mobile, are always in front of the PA. And I ended up using cardioid DPA 4088 on that because it was the only way I could get the headroom. The interesting thing is that I don't like the way a cardioid microphone behaves, because the slightest movement in position, the slightest change in where it's located, slightly closer to the face, you get more proximity effects, so you get more low end, slightly further off, you get less high end. If it moves up a little bit, you get a 3 dB drop in gain, etc., etc. And trying to deal with that in a normal musical theatre environment where people are on and off stage, changing costumes, changing wigs, changing hats, you kind of need the flexibility that an omnidirectional microphone gives you. That's been my experience. Having said that, an omnidirectional microphone that didn't pick up cheekbone resonances would be wonderful, like a 270-degree pickup pattern rather than 360. That would be great. You guys could invent that. I like that a lot. If you go right here, not pick up this bit, pick up the, yeah, there you go.
Thank you for that. Anyone else have an opinion?
Oh, we all have opinions about that. You know, it's a situation that we just don't have a perfect solution for. And I think we all at a certain point in our careers went, oh, I can't take the omnis. I got to try a cardioid for 1 minute until you realize the cardioids get you in so much trouble. And Gareth really explained it very well, the trouble you get into with the cardioids, you know, because we have live actors on stage. And, you know, if you watch people wearing headset microphones and you watch the difference in the positioning of those booms during the performance, they can change radically. And at least with an omni, the frequency response doesn't change that much, and the proximity doesn't change. With the cardioid, you can just literally, it could be a performance stopping problem. You know, if it flips 180, that microphone's useless. It's literally useless at that point. And we can't take that risk of using the cardioid microphones the way that we use microphones, even though in terms of gain before feedback, they are a much better solution. It's a very specific situation, and it's very different than doing concert rock and roll stuff where no one would ever think of using an Omni. You know, they can't. You know, they need to have that gain before feedback. That's their primary consideration. With us on a lot of shows, we have to have that reliability of the frequency response and the regular sound that doesn't change. You know.
Okay, back to Q&A if you don't mind. Another little change in direction from Matthew in the chat. If given the option, where would you use an additional day or week of time? And what he means by that is, would it be in shop prep, rehearsals, tech, previews? And let's
Can we agree on this?
Go ahead, Gareth.
Full sound check with band and cast, please.
Yep.
Is that the general consensus?
I mean, I could always use an extra week in the shop.
And I'm going to say, like, I would always take, I mean, I'm a little bit of a slave to the previews. Like I enjoy that preview period. For me, that's, you know, I like a longer preview period myself.
I'd be a little bit
go for that extra day with the band in the theater. We have an extra day of time with the band in the theater to move that a little earlier. So before we have an audience, we've had a little more time to have the full musical experience of the show.
Mine would be none of them in the theatre at all. The most prepared I've ever felt from an operator's aspect was spending, when I got to learn Come From Away, I spent 2 weeks in the New York production, just mixing the show on a console, playback, just me, myself. And by the time we got to first preview or first tech or wherever we were in London, I was completely comfortable. I've never felt so happy behind a desk in them panic moments. So I'd probably do it before any of that. I'd do it in my own little space, in my own studio, just mixing the show.
Has anybody ever tried multi-track recording the rehearsal room? Has anybody ever done that? I mean, I've always thought, what if I put all the cast in microphones in the rehearsal room, multi-track record the run in the rehearsal room, and then the sound operator can actually get a drop on it before we even start tech? Has anyone ever tried it?
I've never done that, but I mean, it would have to be so late though, by the time they were running. I mean, you're talking about something new, or you're talking about something?
I guess I'm talking about something new, yeah.
Yeah, something new. I mean, it's a good idea, except that by the time they're actually running big enough chunks of it and segments of it, right, it's so late in the process that you're not, what are you gaining, right, at that point? You know, it's a run through, I guess. I mean, maybe you gain I think you just have to look at the calendar.
Yeah.
I suppose it would also matter how much of a desk you've actually got programmed and how set it is in the rehearsal room itself. It might be, you know, just sort of a wee bit pointless, isn't it? But
and that is the difference between West End and
we've never done it.
Yeah.
West End. On the West End, Gareth, you could probably talk more about this. Well, Nevin could too now, could as well. That you have your A1, your mixer in the rehearsal room with the actors before they actually even get to the theater, and they're able to start programming the console a lot sooner than we usually can on Broadway versus West End, which is a great thing. Like you're saying about learning the show, it's another way of learning the show, being in those rehearsals with your console and programming it while you're in rehearsal.
Yeah, I mean, certainly some shows, I mean, as a general rule, we tend to spec a spare console from the beginning of the process through until opening night. Most of the time we don't need it, but it always makes me feel happier to know there's a spare mixing desk in the building. And as a result of that, we can quite often take that same spare mixing desk, send it to the rehearsal room with the A1, and the A1 actually sits there in the rehearsal room and programs the show. Obviously, it can get a bit complicated with file management, particularly when you're loading in and one person's working on one thing and somebody's working on another, and then you get conflicting files. That can be a little bit difficult. As a tangent on that, for Back to the Future, which was Reese's last show, we had a sound effects designer in the rehearsal room for the whole time, and trying to keep show files constant between sound effects designer, the associate and production engineer who was still loading the show in, and Reese who's in the rehearsal room trying to, I mean, it was an absolute nightmare. That's something I'd love somebody to work out, a better way of sharing show files in a way that doesn't conflict with each other. But that was a tangent, so I'll stop talking now.
As designers, do you prefer close miking everything in the pit or going with more area miking?
Depends on the show. Depends on the type of show you're doing. Like when I'm doing more traditional, like the revivals that I do fairly frequently, I don't like to use close miking because I feel like it doesn't actually allow you to get the sound that you want to get for that particular kind of show. You know, like for instance, close miking of strings for traditional Rodgers and Hammerstein musical won't get you the string sound that people really want to hear from that kind of orchestration. So I'll do area miking versus close miking for those kind of shows. In other cases, you really want to have the ability to have a lot of control and you want to get closer mic'd. So it depends, again, it's a stylistic thing, I think, like Nevin said.
Yeah, also band on stage or band off stage, you know, band in a pit, band on stage also can affect those choices about how close you need to get. Again, going back to game before feedback and which microphone choices you make, depending on whether the band is visible or not visible, right? At Hadestown, Jess, we had talked about a lot of that because we had the band in full view, right? So, you know, that makes a big difference too about how close and what kind of mics you're choosing for the band.
And on that show specifically, we actually close mic and area mic the guitar. So we do a combination of both. The close miking to pick up all of the strings and the percussiveness of his playing, and then the sort of wider mic to give it some air. So sometimes both. Yeah. Yeah.
So like on South Pacific, Mark Salzberg and I decided to do two totally separate micings. We called one the classical miking and the other one the Broadway miking. And we had two master faders. And in the bigger, broader sections of the show, we had a separate master DCA that allowed us to bring up the Broadway close mics for like the big dance numbers and things versus the area mics when we wanted to have a bigger, broader sound. And we actually had two separate bandmasters for doing Broadway and doing broad orchestral sounds.
That's super cool.
Yeah, it was fun.
I tend to always do everything close. I very rarely mic anything at a distance. I guess there's two reasons, I have two reasons for this. One, I generally tend to go for quite cinematic sound, which is generally, but linked onto that, I have the idea that I can always make things sound bigger and area in the box, but I can't get rid of air if it's there at the microphone. So my logic is, if I put the microphone really close, then if I want to make it sound distant and airy, then there's tricks that I can do in plug-in land or mixing desks or blah, 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 with reverbs and stuff that I can do to make it sound distant. But if the microphone is at a distance and I want to make it sound close, I can't do that because I can't beat the physics. So my logic is always, my logic at the moment is generally to close mic everything. Generally.
This can get really deep into the weeds here about like signal generation from musical instruments, and like when you close mic a string instrument, are you getting the sound?
A timpani, Scott.
Exactly. I mean, you know, it becomes a very big philosophic discussion about miking and instrument sound production. You know,
a timpani is a fantastic example. The sound of a timpani doesn't generate until something like 2.3 meters above the skin. But you can't mic a timpani at 2.3 meters above the skin in a Broadway pit. For a start, the microphone would be in the way of the leading lady's stomach. And secondly, you just would never get the separation. You just never get it. So everything is this massive compromise. And yeah, I've actually had the very similar conversation to the one Scott and I could very easily disappear off down the rabbit hole of right now, about how by close miking everything, you don't pick up the full timbres of the instruments. And that is absolutely a thing.
But it is a compromise, because like if the strings for some reason have to be near the electric guitar amplifier or near the drum kit, the whole area miking thing goes out the window. You can't area mic the strings because all you'll pick up is drums or the electric guitar sound. So the practicality of it overrules any kind of philosophical argument about sound production.
Yeah. What we would do if practicalities didn't get in the way is grossly different to what we would do, not just with microphone placements, but with everything. I mean, you wouldn't put speakers at either side of the stage, left and right, if there were no practical considerations. We spend all the time trying to image things to people sound coming from the stage, and then we're forced to put speakers all the way off to the outside. Practical considerations. But yeah, you're totally right. What I do is technically compromising the pickup of the sound of the instruments. I've just found it's the better trade-off.
I think sticking on this theme, a bit of a fan question's coming for Jessica. I saw Hadestown at the National Theatre in London and loved it. The decision to use black boom mics on the whole cast, besides mic quality, I guess had to do with the aesthetics. Was that your decision or was it the director's?
It was the director's, actually. Rachel Chopkin specifically does not like the look of hairline lavalier microphones, and she also is not a fan of microphones being skin colored. She very specifically wanted all black boom mics.
Okay, cool. Thank you for that. And then I've got one for Reese as well. Someone is asking, mainly for Reese, digital or paper scripts, and how do you manage redundancy in a digital script?
I've always used paper scripts. It's just comfort zone. I'm willing to try a digital script, but it's all about, for me, about quickness. A pencil and a sticky dot is still the quickest thing. If a designer comes up to me, knocks me on my shoulder saying that needs to go up there, I can quickly write it in, get it done. So I've always stayed old school paper scripts. Just familiarity, I suppose.
Fantastic, thank you. And then there's one here.
I just want to add a really quick little thing about the electronic scripts.
Please.
I have an operator who got held up for a show. The sub was not in town. I got a call to go and mix the show. I showed up in the theater and he had an electronic script with a password. And I was stuck. I was like standing there going, I don't know what I'm gonna do. I don't see a paper script anywhere and I don't know his password. Luckily he showed up at 25 after the hour and he got to mix the show, but it was a big lesson about electronic scripts. Anyway, just a little story there.
Fantastic, thank you. There's so many questions to get through and we've only got 15 minutes left. So I'm going to try and round a couple up. First of all, how do you deal with volumes of shows? So what are the guidelines for that? And then there's a specific question, because I guess this might play into it a little bit, is how do you approach vocal compression on a pop style musical? And does it change drastically between a hairline or a headset being used? I'm going to throw that out there. Someone who wants to put their hand up. So first of all, let's go for volumes of musicals. How do you guys approach that? Gareth.
How do I approach the volume of musicals? Well, I have a reputation for just making them really loud, so you're probably asking the wrong person here. Well, it's got to be comfortable. You can't have the audience. You can't have the audience with their hands over their ears. I mean, I think the thing that is often missed when people talk about the volume of shows is that people very rarely say a show. A layperson never says a show. When they say a show is too loud, they don't generally mean a show is too loud. They mean that certain frequencies are too loud. Because we don't run shows anywhere. Even Bat Out of Hell, which is the loudest show I've ever done, is not rock stadium loud. It's not dangerously loud. But there are certain frequencies, particularly, and I find this a lot, in British actors and actresses trying to do traditional American accents. There's a particular frequency, a kind of frequency that British actors are really, really prone to doing when they're trying to do American accents. And that frequency can get very, very uncomfortable very quickly when you start amplifying it heavily. So I tend to look more at frequency control rather than at overall volume. And the overall volume, it's appropriate to the show. 42nd Street at Drury Lane, which Reese mixed, is not the same volume as Bat Out of Hell at the Coliseum. It's appropriate to the show. But people rarely complain about things being too loud. They complain about things being uncomfortable. They just don't have the language of the lexicon to explain that in a way that makes sense.
Okay, so moving to compression, if someone else wants to pick up, do you have any tricks for compressing vocals? And also someone was asking, do you set a compressor as a default on all instruments as a kind of protection mechanism? And then obviously let them off as you sort of hear the band and everything comes together. So compression, I'm going to go to Nevin.
I'm so curious about what Scott has to say about this.
Okay, Scott or Jessica, yeah.
Well, because Scott, Scott also comes from a studio background, and so like, I feel like there might be a method to the madness in this case, and I don't know, Scott. I'm sorry, Scott, but I'm actually really curious about what you have to say about this.
Oh, damn! And I was curious about what you were going to have to say about this. I just expanding what Gareth was talking about. I generally find that I try to do very well. It's changed a little bit because some of the plugins that now are available on the consoles make me happier doing compression than I used to be. Like for instance, we have to do a little bit of manufacturer stuff, but on Yamaha's new PM series consoles, they have really fantastic algorithms for like the old LA2 compressor, which I find sounds fantastic on vocals when people are singing, and you can push it fairly hard. Like, I will push it where on big vocals, it'll be doing 5 to 7 dB of compression, which usually in theater, we don't try to do that, but I find that it sounds pretty good. But the thing I pay a lot more attention to, and to respond to what Gareth is saying, is multi-band dynamics, where it's not just the British singers who are doing the belt thing. It's in general the Broadway belt thing. You get that stuff where there's frequencies that, there'll be a frequency around 1.2K. There'll be a frequency, around 2K. There'll be a 2.5 to 3. There's different areas in there depending on the voice where the overtones just get really hard, really edgy and aggressive and ugly. And I'll spend a lot of time, once we've gotten to the 90%, I'll spend a lot of time in that second week of previews on vocal channels trying to find the particular frequencies and the multi-band dynamics to control some of that stuff that sounds ugly on the singers because of the combination of the way we mic and the way that Broadway belting sounds over close miking. Because that's really, again, to expand on what Gareth was saying, that's really the thing that sounds the ugliest, I think, when we're doing reinforcement for Broadway musicals, is that really edgy thing that happens when people start to belt, and how to control that specifically versus a general overall compressor, a very specific frequency-related dynamic control.
Yeah.
Well, and I will add to it just really quick, which is, on a combo platter of boom microphones and hairline microphones, that's where things get pretty interesting, because you do tend to approach it differently. I tend to approach it differently with a boom microphone than I do with a hairline microphone. The requirements are different because of the placement of the mic to the sound source and the non-linearity behavior of each of those devices, depending on where they are, can be pretty tricky. So often dynamics processing is used to kind of tame some of that, and might be more aggressive on a boom style microphone than on a hairline style microphone. You'd sort of use your resolution in different ways for those. So, but thanks, Scott. I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but I was so curious about that.
It's okay. And Jessica, I think, did you want to add to that?
I was just going to comment about instrument compression, and that I tend to compress in stages. So I compress at the input, I then compress at the group, usually with a multi-band, and then I will compress everything together on the band master. So it's never So it's never one source like clamping down on anything. It's in stages. So individual instrument, that group of instruments together, and then the whole band together.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And we're down to the last 10 minutes. I'm going to throw back over to Jamie, if that's all right, for a few more questions and then a wrap up. Thank you, guys.
All right. Can you speak a little to the use of timecode in your shows? What do you use to control it? Or I'm sorry, what do you use it to control? You want to pitch their hand up on that one?
I've only ever distributed timecode to other departments. We record it on for archival purposes on Dear Evan Hansen, but we don't use it to control anything in the sound system.
But it is distributed to the projection design and to the lighting designers to sync up with the music department. You know, big moments. Yeah, it's typically for show control for the other departments. I mean, we did on the Share show use it for a minute to control the console for one of the finale moments, which was pretty fun. Which I hadn't done before. I actually had it plugged into the desk and had it doing some pretty interesting things at the console for some kind of on-off stuff that was very specifically timed to stuff in the music, and realized we could automate it. I just had to get over myself a little bit and let timecode do its thing, and it worked. So I'm definitely more open to it than I would have been in the past, but it's not doing a ton of work. Occasionally triggers a sound effect here and there too. If MIDI is not the preferred use, you know, sometimes we'll trigger something off of timecode. I think it just depends on the situation.
I think I actually end up doing quite a lot of timecode stuff, mainly again because of the type of shows that I do. A lot of timecode obviously requires that the show be running to click, so that means that the music department, it means that the show is appropriate to be run to click. Again, looking at a lot of the shows that Scott's done and does, you'd be really hard pushed to do Hello Dolly to click. I mean, that would be really difficult. But something like, we'll talk about Back to the Future, huge amounts of Back to the Future is on click. There's either rock numbers or there's Alan Silvestri's orchestral score, but click is running all the time. So we're throwing timecode out to all the other different departments, but we also throw MIDI show control out quite a lot as well, where we'll have a visual, the standard one is we play the thunder crack and we send MIDI show control to the lighting department to do lightning. But it's really interesting. I reckon we use Back to the Future as a good example because of a lot of show control in that. I reckon there's about 100 MIDI show control messages being sent to lighting or video to synchronize spot effects. So for example, when the door opens on the car, that's a visual effect that the sound operator has to cue. But when that happens, there's the famous Back to the Future sound effect that happens as the door opens. The lights around the car door light up, the wheels flash, and there's like video stuff going on as well. So that we do quite a lot of that. And in answer to Nevin about using timecode to control ourselves, actually we do quite a lot of that. What we sort of have a rule where if it is show critical cue, i.e. if timecode doesn't run for whatever reason and that cue doesn't go within the desk, then that would be a horrible thing. Then that will stay as a manual cue. But there's quite a lot of cues where it might just be for this beat or for this bar, we want guitar 1 to jump up by 3 dB. We'll make those time-coded cues. We might make changes in reverbs for cross stick and snare. We might make those time-coded cues because if it doesn't happen, that's not the end of the world. But we would never make something a timecode cue if it involves re-racking the DCAs so the operator's got the right things in front of them. All of that stays manual. But yeah, we do quite a lot of and sound effects on timecode as well, if it's all happening musically. And I know some people take the route of sound effects being played from keyboards or from Ableton rigs in the pit. Generally, what I try to do is I try to keep the sound effects in my own world so that I can quickly and easily edit them, route them to all these sorts of different places, and just take control information from music departments when it comes
to... Agree 100% with that. Yeah, me too.
Otherwise, you spend days going, here's a new WAV file. Can you put this into Ableton? Oh, I didn't get time to do that today. Then the director shouts at you, why is that sound effect still wrong? Oh, well, I gave the sound effect to Ableton, but they had to put a new song in, so it didn't happen. So generally just taking queuing information in that respect. I find that's best.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of a difference between like Broadway, West End musicals, and I think the Las Vegas kind of style of doing things lends itself much more to doing time code based stuff, I think, as a kind of stylistic thing. And I think, Gareth, you're like doing a show like MJ probably that's gonna be more of almost like a Vegas style show in a way, I would guess to some degree, where it'll require a lot of time coding.
I feel like we need Jonathan Deans here to answer this question. Jonathan Deans does all the big Vegas shows. I feel like he's the man to ask about time code and show control.
Can we get another quick question from Andy, please?
Yeah, sorry, this is a mic-in one that I missed, and I think it's quite a vital one, because I'd like to know the answer to this, actually. So how do you guys work around phasing, especially when you have two characters facing each other? So, yeah. Someone explain that one.
I think Reese could answer this question.
Definitely Reese.
That's my whole job. Line by line mixing is what pretty much we all do. It's about having the most minimal amounts of microphones open, especially vocally, at one time to stop phasing. So my job as an operator is to, if character one says, hello, my name's Reese, character two says, hello, my name's Gareth, at the right times, we put the right microphone up, inevitably to stop the amount of phasing. Unless I do it really badly, then it gets very phasey very quick. But yeah, that's my job really. That's one very important part of what I do on a nightly basis.
What happens when you have a duet with two singers singing facing one another? What do you do?
A wee tear falls from your eye, Scott. A wee tear. But it's then all about making judgment calls. And you know, do you put one microphone up to catch both? Do you blend a bit in? And I don't know, something that I think about a lot really, but I don't know if there's a specific thing you do. I think it's judgment calls almost on a nightly basis sometimes. You know, listening, hearing, oh, can I get away with a bit more tonight, putting that in? Oh, I've completely dropped out one singer there. Maybe I need to put, it's all judgment calls. And I suppose that's what happens as you gain more experience with the show, and with the production, you sort of learn what you can get away with and what you can't get away with. But yeah, that's
from a design point of view, a relationship with the director and the choreographer can really help here as well, because if you've got two people singing really close into each other's faces, if you can just get them to slightly cheat their heads ever so slightly, so one turns their head ever so slightly left, one turns their head ever so slightly right, so they're not singing straight into each other's faces, but they're sort of singing slightly down the either side, assuming you have microphones relatively symmetrical on both people, you can just sort of tweak it a little bit, and you can do it in such a way that the audience is completely unaware. And to be honest, these days I can get away with doing it without even having to talk to the director and choreographer, because they don't even notice. You just go and talk to the cast members and just get them just ever so slightly twist, so they're not singing straight into each other's microphones. And I find that really helps as well.
That's
Yeah,
great.
that's a really interesting point about that gets back to the politics of how you deal with directors and actors and what you can and can't get away with as a designer in terms of your requests of people and changing staging to help you. It's a whole interesting area of phasing.
Thank you so much. Back to Jamie.
We're coming up to the close of our time, so I'm going to throw this last question out there. We've got 2 minutes left. Advice for young designers and engineers. Can I throw that question to Jessica, please?
I would say stay curious, ask a lot of questions. Don't be afraid to say you don't know something. Yeah, that's really stay curious, keep learning.
Right, Gareth?
Also, dive into dive into other disciplines that aren't sounds. Like literally everything I learned about stage management, or you know, being an A2 or being an A1 or being a designer, it all informs me in the position that I'm in. So keep growing.
Right. Yeah. Yep. Gareth, can you add?
Be prepared to start at the bottom. Be prepared to do whatever it takes, really. I mean, the number of stories you hear about the famous record producer who started off as the person making the tea in the recording studio. In my case, I started off doing work experience for big festivals and did all the horrible jobs, pulling the heavy cables around under the festival stages and knee-deep mud and all that kind of stuff. Be prepared to do that. Be prepared to work as hard as it takes to get noticed. And yeah, I mean, for me, it was work experience. And you know what? Work experience is much harder to do on Broadway than it is in the UK, because we don't have anything like the union control that that New York does. But outside of New York, if you can get and do work experience, just get your face known and be somebody people want to spend time with.
Nevin, advice for young designers and engineers.
You know, I think I once asked an orchestrator how to become an orchestrator, and they said, orchestrate something, like that was like, get a piece of music and orchestrate it. That's how you become an orchestrator. And I think to a certain extent that, that's kind of the best advice I can maybe give a young designer, which is design things, get your hands on projects, get your hands on material, get in rooms with people who want to make something and do the job. Because there's no substitute for just the accumulated experience. So I'd advise get out there and design a thing.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Reese, can you add anything to that?
Yeah, I suppose I had a lecturer when I was at university that told me sound engineering's 10% sound engineering and 90% people skills. And I think I've always stuck by that. We spend hours, up to 18 hours a day, 16 hours a day in the same room as each other, trying to create a show. So be positive, be happy, be someone that you want to be around all the time. And I think that just evolves your career quicker and quicker and quicker, really. Be the person that someone wants to go to with their problem in a good way. I think that really helps.
And Scott Lehrer.
Reese just basically said what I was going to say. I think, we have to just treat other people with respect and bring a positive presence into the room. It's really easy doing sound to kind of start to feel isolated and start to feel like other people don't understand what you're doing and become a little bit of a victim. Don't ever let that become the case. Just keep a really good attitude of your work with other people. Keep open-minded about stuff and treat people with respect. And that's really important.
Thank you very much. It's time for me to close up episode 3 of Don't Stop the Education, but please understand that this does continue. This fantastic series does continue. And please go to Sennheiser.com/webinars for all of the online training and educational options from Sennheiser. From the entire Sennheiser staff and family, I would like to very much thank all of our panelists for taking the time. It was absolutely fascinating, and I'm sure that we could probably sit here all day and do this, but we're going to have to move it along. But thank you to all of you for your poignant answers, and thank you for everyone who tuned in and everyone who asked questions. So from all of us to all of you, let's stay safe out there, and please come back for the next episode.
Thanks, guys.
Everyone have a great day.
Cheers, guys. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.